Soapbox After Dark. Aaron Matei, Buzzsaw, has had enough. And he's aiming this, by the way, at mainstream media. Not just mainstream media, I'm sorry. Lefty, independent media itself. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is Soapbox After Dark. I hope you guys are doing all right. I am wide awake, and I'm going to have to be up extraordinarily early this morning. I have a clinic visit. And so I'm probably going to be up all night. So when real men can't sleep, real men do the news. I am here. My powers are intact. Let's get it done. I actually came on to report other news, but this story was already primed that I was going to do earlier today, but Dora was on, so he was going to suck the audience. So let's get to this one now before I get to the other heavier issues. Iran seizing boats, somewhat of a heavy issue. So, but before I get to that, Buzzsaw Aaron Matei. I stalk Buzzsaw's page, and every so often Buzzsaw, his feelings come out on how he perceives media. Because keep in mind, he's a journalist. And I strongly suspect that if you notice, this is his issue. Like, this is the thing that has pissed him off and has lit a fire into him. And that he's been going with pretty staunchly for the last 2 or 3 years or so, at the very least, since Trump got elected. And when he was on the show, when he was on here for an interview, he expressed frustration with media. And he even made the point that while he was at Real News Network, there was friction on this very specific issue. And if you notice, when he left Real News Network, it trended towards Russiagate. Well, Buzzsaw was on Twitter today, and something came out the pike today. And I don't know exactly if this is the thing that pissed him off, but ultimately, a new technology from a Russian company that's been out for 2 years, facial technology. Democratic Party starts screaming that they need an investigation into this facial technology, wondering whether or not this is a new attack from Russia. To make this worse, if it could get any worse, I mean, this is kind of in the bottom of the barrel in regards to the Russiagate stuff. Schumer is calling for an official investigation. This is official White House. This is official official Tinder. His name is on it, Schumer. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. They're talking about a photo editor software. It's just, it adds smiles or it ages somebody. So like right here, like old Sheldon. That's what it does. They're concerned maybe the Russians are going to take people's information. I think, this was the thing that he put out. And so I'm suspecting that this was the thing that kind of pissed him off. But beyond that point, he makes this argument that Trump gets elected on xenophobia and race baiting and all this other stuff. But the Democratic Party didn't look at that. They pointed to the Russians. And what is he doing right now? He's literally basing his campaign off of a rerun of 2016 because he has nothing to show for it. Now, personally, I don't care if Trump is racist. I care what he does. I thought Trump was racist when he first took that office. I care what he does. That's the thing that matters. And right now, he's focusing the public's attention based off of, you may say, an overreaction by media and by the Democratic Party, and to using that as a campaign thing. If you don't have anything to run on, you go back to your basics. And this is going to be one of his basics. Now, Matei gets on Twitter, and he expresses his frustration, not at mainstream media, because to some degree that's corporate media. You can expect a falsity with corporate media on this stuff. More so with independent media, with media outlets like TYT, Democracy Now! And I strongly suspect he would even say Real News Network, even though he didn't put him in here. At the very least, he expressed frustration on this show about Real News Network. So let's look at the series of tweets. One reason we're not going to have accountability for the colossal media and political failure that was Donald Trump Russia conspiracy theory is that the top progressive media outlets that would normally be demanding accountability fell for and promoted the Russiagate scam themselves. Hook, line, and sinker, by the way. I mean, after all, Aaron Matei. And look, I give Cenk Uygur credit because Cenk Uygur debated various people on this very specific issue when other media outlets didn't even have him on. So, fair point to that. But in this very specific instance, he's like, look, you guys, you hated Trump. You hated his guts. And a bunch of information was put out on a Russiagate conspiracy that you fell for. And you ran with for 3 years. And then after falling for it and running with it for 3 years, pretended as if nothing took place over the last 3 years and kept it moving. And in some mainstream media outlets, pat themselves on the back. There were people who congratulated Rachel Maddow. Rachel Maddow got it wrong. All of these guys got it wrong. All of them were putting out information from a very specific point of view that was used literally as a psyop in order to attack Trump for the campaign stuff. Here's the other catch. From a psychology standpoint, the first thing that's put into your brain, like the first bit of information that you get, sticks with you. And that's the information that you will cognitively defend. Because to some degree, in an odd way, you get associated with information. It's almost like who you are gets wrapped up into what that information is. And if that information is wrong, to some degree, something in you is off. It's a weird thing. People will defend certain points of view. That's not necessarily a bad person. Like that's an everybody thing. There's certain cognitive biases and everything else that goes into play. But my point is this. The moment that this is enshrined into people's perspective, Trump and Russia, it's set. Doesn't matter what Mueller says. It's set. When Bill Maher comes out and says, I don't care what Mueller says, I know what's true. He says this. That's a religious belief. He says it. He doesn't care what the investigation says. He was screaming and howling for the investigation. All of these guys were. They get it. And then they say, we don't care about the results. Why? A, they hate Trump. And B, it had already been enshrined into their brain that there was an association between those two things. I shit you not. It's a real thing. It's a real psychology thing. All right, let's go through the other ones. I know I'm being a broken record. It's a bummer for me both professionally and personally. Russiagate degraded the noble profession of journalism, especially adversarial journalism. And people I know and work with drank the Kool-Aid and mocked, sidelined those of us that didn't. Think about what he's saying. If I just went along to get along, I may be further along in my career at this point. And I don't know if he would ever own up to this. I would question, and I would love to know whether or not he would still be at Real News Network. I should have asked him that. I didn't want to ask him that because I had a hard time getting him on the show in the first place. And the conversation wasn't necessarily about him. It was about Russiagate. And you know, it gets a little dicey when you make a conversation about the individual as opposed to the topic that you're discussing. Especially when they're journalists, because his point is reporting the story. If you notice, even in that interview, he has a tendency to it's an interview. It's not a conversation. Not to have conversations, and so sometimes just tripping over one another. But that's an interesting point. Russiagate degraded the noble profession of journalism, especially adversarial journalism. People I know and work with drank the Kool-Aid and mocked and sidelined those of us that didn't. Amazingly, I've seen a grand total of 0 contrition or self-reflection. No, there's not going to be because they hate Trump. Only deflection, delusion, and doubling down. Even those who peddle the Iraq war hoax were forced to admit they got it wrong. That's true, by the way. That's true. I'm not just referring to MSNBC. I'm referring to TYT, Mother Jones, The Intercept. Its editors not Glenn Greenwald, Democracy Now!, who go to Russia Gate expert Marcy Wheeler, and many more. I love that. It's like, look, you guys essentially parroted a mainstream media narrative. And there's nothing wrong with parroting a mainstream media narrative if it's right. Meaning I have no issue with harping on to a narrative that the mainstream media run with if I think they're right. But in this particular case, some of this got into a certain degree of delusion and conspiracy theory. And there's been no going back saying, you know what, we got it wrong. Our bad. We're going to do better on this. We hated Trump. We thought that the evidence was there to show a connection between those two things. And clearly, there's not a connection between those two things. Let's move forward from here. That never took place. Nor is that going to take place. Because for that to take place, it would mean media, whose job is to get reality right, got it wrong for literally 3 years. Can you know, how do you deal with that? Your job is to serve hamburgers, and you've been serving, Ebola patties for 3 years. And people are like, you had one job. You had one job. Can you go back and say, look, we were serving Ebola patties. We couldn't get the hamburger thing right. Our bad. But trust us now on the exact same thing. Trust us now on we're going to get reality right this time around. Look, I get it. Trump is a horrible, horrible president. That is true. By the same token, you lose a certain degree of credibility when you're going on these crusades to go after the president as opposed to just doing your goddamn jobs. Doing your job in and of itself is sufficient. I guess my point is just reporting is sufficient. But this got into a conspiracy theory. And they didn't have what they say they had. Ultimately, this whole narrative was Trump was working with the Russians. That was the core thesis of it. None of this obstruction nonsense. Trump was working with the Russians. And all of these lefty media outlets, especially TYT, who was extraordinarily egregious on this front, got it wrong. And Cenk Uygur, to this day, doesn't own up to the fact he got it wrong. Said Trump is being told what to do by Vladimir Putin. And it's like, how do you know this? I just know it. You have anything to show for that? No, I don't. And, the sad part is, one of the points that he makes is, we're getting closer and closer to destruction. And if you listen to what Vladimir Putin was saying, yes, I was watching one of his speeches. Russia has been invaded, 3 times? And in those invasions, 10 million, 20 or 30 million, there's a cultural relevance. We don't get the weight of cultural significance. And I say this as somebody who didn't get the weight of cultural significance, but it's real. It matters. If you're it's like calling an African-American person, an N-word, they're going to feel some kind of way about it. But maybe if you're in another country, you don't necessarily get the gravity of it. Well, the same thing is true in other countries. There is a cultural significance. Meaning, when I'm in Poland and we're talking about Russians, they hate the Russians. There's a reason they hate the Russians because of the way, the Soviet Union behaved, the way Stalin behaved when, the rally, essentially, that war that Poland won, the miracle at the Vistula, I think they call it. And Stalin was responsible. So Stalin, when he gets him in office, it's extraordinarily harsh. He's just as bad, almost as ever so, as Hitler is. He carries a burden. They feel that. And me not being fully aware of that and getting into conversations and it starts becoming aware of you, it matters. I'm saying this in this context. When Putin is talking about this stuff and he's like, this is not a joke. You guys are taking certain provocative behaviors. This is not a joke. And he's saying this is not a joke because he's talking about a country that got invaded multiple times by the West. And in those invasions, losing 10 million and 20 million people, they took the heaviest burden in those wars. And I guarantee you they are fully aware of that. I guarantee you they are fully aware of that. Aaron Matei, Buzzsaw, doing what he does, man. Buzzsaw doing what he does. All right, I'm going to end this. Guys, if you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. But you can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. Even $1 helps. We say that all the time because that is absolutely true.